Us channel. For today's episode, we are going to learn and explore the different literary traditions of Philippine literature in English together with Ina, Jenny, Rhea, Jessie, and Faye. And it's going to be so much fun. But first, let me ask you a question. Do you know what literature in English is? Can someone help us? I know someone who can help us with it. Miss Ina, can you please explain to us what literature in English is?
Oh, hi, I'm Ina, and look at where we are today. Do you have any idea of where we are at? Oh yes, we are in the world of literature, and I'm here to help you define what literature is. Are you guys ready? Literature in English refers to written or spoken works that are created in English language. This includes works such as novels, short stories, poetry, plays, and essays. These works are often seen as artistic expression that reflect the cultural, social, and historical context in which they were created. Literature in English can be used to entertain, educate, and provoke thought and emotions in readers or audiences. Some of the most well-known and influential work of literature in English includes William Shakespeare's plays, Charles Dickens' novels, and Virginia Woolf's essays. The study of literature in English is an important part of many educational programs as it allows students to gain insight into human experience and develop critical thinking skills. And I do hope, guys, that you have learned something from literature. This is Ina once again, and if you happen to have any questions, don't hesitate to ask by the end of our discussion. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Oh, thanks Ina. That was such a great help. Now, I am wondering what literary traditions of Philippine literature are in English. Jenny, can you tell us about it? Jenny?
Hi guys, it's me again, Jenny. And you called the right one for help. And now, I will tell you about the 5 major literary traditions of Philippine literature. The 5 literary traditions of Philippine literature are Native, Islamic, Spanish, American, and lastly is the nationalist. And at this juncture, I am going to share with you the first tradition, which is the native tradition. According to Northrop Frye, literature is like a looking glass through which the whole cultural history of the nation that produced it comes into focus, and that it is possible to see the cultural history of the nation by looking through that imagination, which is the language and the realm of literature, cited in Wilenski 1998 to 236. Surveying Philippine literature is like a looking at the cadastral map of socio-cultural knowledge in which not only many things are added, lost, changed, and continue over time, but also borrowed foreign influences get indigenized and incorporated into the native fabric, with local knowledge acting each time to filter, modify, and improve on any new elements to form who the Filipino is today. Native tradition plays a crucial role in reproducing the structure of native society. It teaches the young members of the tribe about values, history, worldview, as well as the legitimations of the authority of their rulers. Philippines already had its own rich literary tradition, both written and oral, long before the Spaniards came, which continues until now. Due to reasons such as the impermanence of the leaves and barks used by the natives for writing, their burning by the Spanish friars, the introduction of the printing press and the Roman alphabet, which replaced the native syllabary, and the letters' unsuitability for recording long passages, there are only few written pre-colonial literary works that have survived to this day. For this reason, why knowledge of indigenous literature nowadays primarily comes from ethnic cultural minorities that have been never colonized and thus serves as windows to the past. It is the kind that is committed to memory and communicated through word of mouth across generations. You want to know more about the Islamic literary tradition and Philippine literature? Well, my friend Rhea will share it with us. Are you guys excited?
Thank you for that great information, Jenny. Now that we have an idea about the native literary tradition of Philippine literature, we are going to learn about the Islamic literary tradition of Philippine literature. Now, fasten your seatbelts and let's explore. Hello everyone, I am Vilya Surya May and I will going to discuss about the Islamic tradition. So in the 13th century, Islam reached and spread to the southern part of the Philippines from the Middle East by way of Malacca, Malaysia. So it is claimed that had the Spaniard not came, the whole archipelago would have been Islamized. In fact, when Spaniard conquistador came to Manila, they were surprised to find Muslim traders from the south as well as several thriving Muslim community in a selected part of the city. So this observation goes only to show the extent of influence of Islam in the archipelago long before the coming of the colonizer. As a social group, Islamic society is pretty much structured. So first of all, Muslims believe in only one God, which is Allah, and his Prophet Muhammad. They follow the Quran faithfully as their guide to holiness and salvation to the extent that it is not allowed to be translated from Arabic into any other language. Once a year, they make a pilgrimage to Mecca, the holy land for Islam. They also hold a religious occasion such as Ramadan, which is a period of fasting and worshipping. Moreover, as a sign of their ultimate obedience to the will of Allah, they are ready to die as martyr in spreading and defending the religion against their non-Muslim enemies. So due to their long history of engaging in religious battle and of being discriminated in predominantly Christian countries, they are quite antagonistic and defensive towards the people of other religion. It is for this reason Muslim literature manifests their own interpretation of history, as well as the challenges and dangers Muslims have faced over time as colored by their own emotion and analysis. It consists of story about the sacrifice made by martyrs of their faith and of religion legends that legitimize the authority of the Sultan and the teaching of the Quran. A typical selection of this tradition includes works that are directly related to the belief, customs, and rituals of Islam in which the content is more important than the form and style of writing. It is important to emphasize that indigenous literary oral tradition did not die even with the coming of Islam. It has persisted and coexisted with the latter in such a way that the old has mixed with the new to form an amalgam called the folk Islam. Their common elements have merged such that the foreign influence they incorporated into the existing native fabric in a sublimatory fashion behind which is the principle of continuity and change. The process of assimilating new elements in order to enrich the existing knowledge stock, producing a new synthesis that is no longer foreign but native through the working of Filipino ingenuity and creativity. So this creative process of adaptive sublimation applied to old tradition as the characteristic Filipino way of making borrowed elements as its own. I hope that you enjoy, guys, and it was really fun to learn Islamic literature with you. Now, we're going to learn the Spanish literary tradition with Abby. Are you guys ready?
Hola, chicos! Yes, it's me again, Abby. And now, we are going to learn about Spanish literary tradition of Philippine literature in English. ¿Están listos, chicos? ¡Vamos! Philippine literature during the Spanish colonial period was mainly dominated by religious and secular themes. When Spaniards came, they brought with them the Latin culture and medieval worldview that emphasized hierarchy, order, authority, and obedience. They tried to legitimize their colonial rule by way of stories, by narrating the lives of the great biblical characters, particularly the life of Jesus Christ and of the saints whose main themes are complete surrender to the will of God and the virtue of living a life of sacrifice, penitence, and patient suffering in this world in the hope of being rewarded in the next life. Most of the writers during this time were friars. Wait, do you know what friars is? Friar is a member of men's Roman Catholic group who studies or teaches about Christianity. Friars owned the printing presses, which were too expensive for ordinary people to make use of. When Spaniards introduced new things, they also replaced some old ones. One example was the native syllabary, which faded out of use with the introduction of Roman alphabet, except in a handful of tribes in the far-flung areas. The loss of ancient alphabet was one of the reasons behind the decline of indigenous literature, especially for those who came under their colonial rule by Spanish, such as Tagalogs. Unlike other ethnic groups in the far north and south and on the highlands of the archipelago, which produced their own epics, the lowland Tagalogs living near the colonial capital never had one. Now, can you give me some of the literary forms that the Spaniards introduced in the Philippines? Can you give me at least one or two? Great! Yes, some of the new literary forms which the Spaniards introduced other than passion were lyrical songs and poems, the comedia, a play on Christians versus Muslims, dramas, the sinaculo, passion play, the zarzuela, a musical play, the sermon, the novel, and the essay. Many of these were religious and were moralistic in tone. In addition, they also borrowed their subject, style, and form from Spanish works which mirror the institutions, events, people, and customs of medieval Europe. For instance, concurrent with the religious poems of the missionaries, balladeers, and local poets giving praise to God and the saints, Tagalog poetry also dealt with the topics concerning tragic romance, feudalism, and chivalry, which were catered to the changing taste of secular poetry by the emerging middle class. Over time, these important forms of literature had been Filipinized and became part of the native traditions. Stories that were originally meant to be read and narrated were sung and even performed, a characteristic sign of the Filipino mind in indigenizing and sublimating foreign influences. Now, let's learn about the American literary tradition of Philippine literature with our friend, Jessie!
Hi guys, I'm your friend Jessie. Come on, join me as we learn the American literary tradition of Philippine literature with fun and excitement. So what are you waiting for? Let's go! opportunities the Spaniards denied them in the political, economic, and social spheres were precisely what the Americans gave, partly as a matter of principle and partly to win them over. From them, the Philippines inherited its democratic beliefs and institutions, influenced by their own colonial struggle for independence from Britain and by the ideas of the French Revolution and the Enlightenment. They also reinforced the liberal ideas fostered by the Philippine independence nationalist movement from Spain. It was also from the Americans that Filipinos got their first taste of living a consumerist capitalist lifestyle with its focus on endless mass production, consumption, and capital accumulation. In the early decades of American occupation, Philippine literature was very much alive and full of creativity. The aborted success of the Philippine revolutions against Spain, caused by the sudden entry of America into the picture in collaboration with the Philippine middle class, was still fresh in the minds of many Filipinos. It was only natural that the literature of that time dealt with the issue of American imperialism and urged the people to continue their struggle for self-determination. The literary genre that flourished during the American period were poetry, zarzuela, short story, and the novel. So poetry was written in the three languages, which are the Filipino, Spanish, English, and in the different dialects. So writers of this period drew their inspiration from the writings of the propagandists and the revolutionaries, praising and repeating the patriotic and humanist ideals of the revolution. Likewise, alongside this strand of nationalist literature, endured traditional forms of literature that presented and critiqued the ills besetting Philippine society. An example was the Filipino adaptation of the Spanish musical play Zarzuela, which showed the pitiful condition of the Philippines under the new colonial regime. Meanwhile, in the local dailies and magazines read by ordinary people, especially in the countryside, poems, novels, and dramas on romance and everyday human interest topics were still very much widespread in the literary form of the earlier Spanish tradition, though the beginnings of the experimentation by some writers on new patterns of versification, rhyme, meter, and stanza following the American style could be gradually seen. Public speaking and debate, or another form of literature, were also born at this time. Also, during this time, Hollywood came the Philippines in the form of movies and vaudeville shows, which in turn pushed to the countryside the earlier forms of entertainment and stage performance from the Spanish period. In this way, the urban theaters of yesterday become the rural theaters of today. One-act plays began to be performed in university, campuses, and the technique of writing short stories and free verse poems. Filipino writers went into all forms of literature like news, reporting, poetry, stories, plays, essay, and novels. Writings clearly depicted their love of country and their longings for independence. With English becoming the official language of instruction and government, and the opening up of opportunities to study in America for Filipino scholars, the Filipino intellectual became much more cosmopolitan and Americanized. In the university classrooms of literature, a new generation of writers in English trained in the Anglo-American tradition was born. As a result, fewer and fewer writers wrote about national independence, a theme that was almost forgotten in the heyday of the occupation. Instead, they got attracted to the glamour associated with the modern style and aimed to produce avant-garde Filipino literature in English comparable to that of the West. And that's all. Thank you. Did you guys learn a lot? Wow, that's great! Now that we already know the American literary tradition of Philippine literature, do you have any idea about the last type of literary tradition of Philippine literature? Don't worry guys, because we are going to learn this with our friend Faye.
Wow, thank you for sharing with us the American period, JC. We have really learned a lot. Now, do you want to learn about the nationalistic period? If yes, I'm so glad to hear that. So, nationalistic period. A nation pertains to a stable, historically developed community of people with territory, economy, culture, and language united under one government. Nationalism means love for one's country and its people. The influx of liberal from Europe with the opening of Suez Canal paved the way of the nationalistic period. Nationalistic period covers the propaganda movement and the revolutionary movement. Propaganda means the good reforms to be established. So there are three characteristics of nationalistic period, and these are: number one, planted seeds of nationalism in Filipino because of the propaganda movement. Number two, language shifted from Spanish to Tagalog to use the primary language of the Filipinos. Number three, address the masses instead of the intelligentsia, means to establish education to all. So there are also literary forms of nationalistic period. Number one of these is the propaganda literature. Under of this was political essays. It talks about the news articles or newspaper, editorials, or any written which exposes the anomalies of the Spanish government. So Diaryong Tagalog, found by Marcelo H. Del Pilar. So, he was the second editor of La Solidaridad, born on August 30, 1850 in Kupang, San Nicolas, Bulacan. He was regarded as the most dangerous by the Spaniards due to his strong words. He used the pen name of Plaridel. The Solidarity, Graciano Lopez Haina as editor. Graciano Lopez Haina was born on December 18, 1856 at Iloilo. He was the first editor of La Solidaridad. He was regarded as the orator because of his good talks. Under of this is political novels. These are novels which is used to describe the Spanish government in the Philippines. No Limit Tangere is one of the novel which is also adapted in the national TV right now. So it means Touch Me Not. This was written by Dr. Jose Rizal. It is a novel about the story of Crisostomo Ibarra, which is also related to the life of Rizal. El Filibusterismo, the continuation of No Limit Tangere, it means the reign of the greed. So, Dr. Jose Rizal, born on June 19, 1861 in Calamba, Laguna, honorary president of La Solidaridad, and the founder of Philippine League. And his two novels paved the way of the revolution. So, the second one of literary forms is the revolutionary literature. Risque written papers which is a direct attack to the Spanish government. Now, under of this is the political essay. Kalayaan, the next newspaper of Katipunan, after the Diaryong Tagalog, edited by Emily Hyacinth. Emilio Jacinto, born on December 15, 1875 in Torozo, Manila, he is the editor of Peace. His famous poem was To the Fatherland, inspired by Rizal's My Last Farewell. His pen name is Sunday Light. He also write the Cartilla, primer of Katipunan, which contains the rules and regulations of the group. Under of it was also the poetry. Apolinario Mabini was born on July 22, 1864 in Tanuan, Batangas. He was known as the great paralytic brain of the Katipunan. Thus, History of the Philippines, also written by Andres Bonifacio, and Andres Bonifacio was born on November 30, 1863 in Tondo, Manila. The Supreme of Together, the leader of the division of the Katipunan, Magdiwang, Light and Darkness, was also written by Emilio Jacinto. So thank you for joining me as we learn about the nationalistic period. I have so much fun. I hope you learned something about my report. Thank you!
you friends for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you guys for being with us as we learn and explore the Philippine literature in English. We have so much fun. See you in our next episode. Bye!